In the year 2000, by some estimates, there was enough fiber optic cable buried under American soil to circle the Earth more than 1,000 times over. An estimated 85 to 95% of it sat there completely dark, unused for years. The company that made the machines to light that fiber up briefly became the single most valuable company on the planet, worth more than Walmart and ExxonMobil combined, and more than General Electric on its own. Then it lost roughly $500 billion in value within about 2 years. This is how a good idea, the internet needs more capacity, turned into one of the biggest write-offs in American history. That company was Cisco Systems. In March of 2000, at the very top of the dot-com bubble, Cisco's market value hit roughly $550 billion, briefly making it the most valuable public company on Earth. Cisco didn't lay a single mile of that fiber. It built the routers and switches that sat at each end of the cable, moving data through it. So when Wall Street bought Cisco stock, it wasn't really betting on routers. It was betting on how much data would eventually flow through every pipe being built across the country. To put that number in perspective, $550 billion was more than Microsoft was worth at the time, more than General Electric on its own, more than Walmart and ExxonMobil combined. One company, built almost entirely on networking hardware, had briefly outpaced titans of software, industry, retail, and energy, each on their own terms. That's not a valuation based on current earnings. That's a valuation based on a story about the future, one where internet traffic would keep exploding, forever, at a pace nobody had actually verified. Here's the number that justified all of it. Internet traffic, analysts said, was doubling every 100 days. That stat got repeated in boardrooms, in IPO prospectuses, in speeches from telecom executives over and over, until it just became accepted fact. Except almost nobody repeating it could point to where it actually came from. It traced back to one internal report, misquoted and passed along so many times the original source basically disappeared. Hundreds of billions of dollars in investment got justified by a stat that, by the time it mattered most, nobody could verify. So telecom companies went on a building spree. Global Crossing, Q-West, Level 3, WorldCom. Between 1996 and 2001, these companies together spent an estimated $90 billion or more laying long-haul fiber routes across the country and under the ocean floor. They weren't just building for the demand they expected. They were building for demand that assumed every other company's optimistic forecast was also correct, stacking assumptions on top of assumptions, all at the same time. Global Crossing said it laid roughly 100,000 miles of fiber, undersea and across land, in its race to build a global network in under 5 years. That's enough cable to wrap around the Earth about 4 times over, built by a single company, racing to get there before its competitors did. Ships crossed the Atlantic and the Pacific laying undersea cable, connecting continents with capacity nobody was using yet. It was one of the largest peacetime infrastructure build-outs in history, funded almost entirely by debt, on the bet that the traffic would show up right on schedule. Nobody involved was being irrational on their own. Each company simply assumed it had to grab territory before its rivals did. Here's how oversized this got. Once you lit a single strand of fiber with the right equipment on both ends, that one strand could theoretically carry more data than the entire internet used at the time. And companies weren't laying one strand. They were laying cables with dozens of strands, on routes where competing networks were already running parallel to them. Even one company's build-out was arguably more capacity than the whole country needed. So how did all this actually get funded? And how did the demand keep looking real enough to justify it? Because Cisco and its biggest rivals weren't just selling equipment to these telecom startups. They were lending them the money to buy it, which is where this story gets a lot less innocent. Cisco, Lucent Technologies, and Nordal Networks all ran vendor financing arms, in-house lenders that extended billions of dollars in credit to telecom customers, specifically so those customers could buy Cisco, Lucent, and Nordal equipment. A customer with no independent revenue of its own could still show up on the books as a real sale. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. Some of that exploding demand wasn't real demand from real internet users. It was equipment makers lending money to their own customers, so the customer could buy the equipment maker's own products. Nordal rode that same cycle. Its stock inflated so much that, near its peak in 2000, Nordal reportedly accounted for more than a third of the total value of Canada's stock market, a peak value estimated by various sources at somewhere between $250 and $300 billion. By 2009, Nordal was bankrupt, gone. The financing that had propped up its customer base couldn't survive once the underlying story stopped working. And the story did stop working. The dot-com crash that started in 2000 didn't just kill unprofitable websites. It wiped out the very companies that were supposed to generate all that internet traffic, the customers of the customers. Without them, the fiber networks that had just been built suddenly looked absurdly, obviously oversized. Cisco's own stock tells the story. It fell from a split-adjusted high near $80 a share in March of 2000 to under $10 by late 2002, a decline of roughly 85 to 90%. The most valuable company on Earth had lost more than $500 billion in value in under 2 years. WorldCom, one of the biggest fiber builders, collapsed in 2002 after an accounting fraud that was uncovered in stages and eventually totaled roughly $11 billion at the time, the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. But it's worth separating two different failures here. WorldCom's collapse was a crime. Executives cooked the books to hide losses that were already happening. Global Crossing's collapse was different. No fraud charges defined that story. It filed for bankruptcy in January of 2002 with more than $12 billion in debt, after spending an estimated $15 billion building its network. That wasn't a lie. That was a legitimate business built on a forecast that turned out to be wrong at an enormous scale, and lumping those two stories together misses the actual lesson. So what happened to all that fiber once the companies that built it went broke? It didn't disappear. It just sat there in the ground, unlit, because lighting it required equipment and demand that no longer existed at the pace anyone had promised. Industry estimates from the early 2000s put unused fiber, what the industry calls dark fiber, at somewhere between 85 and 95% of everything that had been laid nationally. The exact number moved depending on who you asked, but it stayed consistently in that range for years after the crash. Global Crossing's network, built for an estimated $15 billion, sold out of bankruptcy in 2003 for around $250 million, primarily to Singapore Technologies Telemedia, after a rival bid that had included Hutchison Whampoa was dropped amid U.S. national security concerns. That's less than 2 cents on the dollar. The physical fiber itself hadn't degraded. Glass strands can sit dark underground for a decade and still work fine, once someone finally hooks up the equipment to light them. And that's exactly what happened. The infrastructure survived. The capital that financed it did not. That distinction, the physical thing surviving while the money behind it evaporates, is the real through line of this whole story, and it's about to pay off the question we opened with. The demand Cisco and the telecoms predicted in 1999 eventually showed up, just 10+ years late. YouTube launched in 2005. Netflix started streaming in 2007. Cloud computing scaled through the 2010s. Then the pandemic sent millions of people home to video call and stream all at once. All of that traffic finally consumed the capacity built during the bubble. But the companies that captured that value mostly weren't the ones who built the networks in the first place. Firms that scooped up distressed fiber assets for pennies on the dollar, including Level 3, later merged into what's now Lumen, built profitable businesses on infrastructure someone else paid full price to bury. And as of recent years, Cisco's stock still hadn't sustainably reclaimed its March 2000 high, even though the company remains large and profitable today. This exact pattern is visible again today. Massive capital spending on data centers and AI infrastructure, justified by projected future demand that nobody can fully verify yet, including circular financing deals between infrastructure builders and the companies supplying their chips and equipment, echoing Cisco, Lucent, and Nortel. This isn't a prediction about how it ends. It's just worth naming the pattern when you see it. So here's the one thing worth remembering. When you hear demand for this is infinite, used to justify massive borrowing, check who's financing the buyer, because the fiber story shows the technology can be completely right while the money behind it still gets wiped out. Being early to a real trend with too much leverage can produce the same wreckage as being wrong. This is a historical pattern to watch for, not investment advice. If this changed how you think about money, subscribe. There's a new breakdown every week.